In order for New Zealand to succeed in a global market, Sir Paul Callaghan was adamant that we need to find and exploit the niche markets. We need to play to our strengths. We need to find what we're good at. We need to exploit it. So what are our strengths? What are the avenues that we're going to go down as we look towards the future? New Zealand is a country with a proud 100% pure green image that we like to make the most of. We're a wealthy country. We're a healthy country. We're a well-educated country, for the large part. We have a history of engineering excellence and world-leading innovation. And that is what defines our niche. Among that, we're a country that boasts 75% renewable energy generation. And it's that statistic that leads me to what I'm going to be talking to you about today. It's called distributed power systems, and it involves a couple of key concepts. The first of which is individuals at homes, at schools, and small towns producing their own electricity that they need. And the second step of this is them selling what they don't need to the grid, effectively making money. The success of this scheme can be seen where a similar system works in the UK, and individuals are making up to £600 a year simply from having a solar panel on their roof. That's $1,400 in New Zealand terms. So what I'm going to be talking to you about today, first of all, the underlying science behind distributed power systems. How does it work? And the second thing I'm going to be talking to you about is what are the benefits that are going to accrue to New Zealand on the social front, the environmental front, and the economic front. And I'm going to finish with a little bit of what it's going to take and understanding the model that's required to bring this dream to reality. But let's start with the science, and I'm going to start with the good old silicon solar panel. Photovoltaic cell, or PVC. These things, they weigh a ton, right? They're heavy, they're bulky, they're large, they're impractical, and they're expensive. But they work, they generate electricity. That's not good enough for New Zealand firm Silenza. Born out of Waikato University, they've created a new product. It incorporates water heating and incorporates photovoltaics into a steel roofing product that is discreetly on your roof without you knowing about it, and does a couple of things. The first of which is it produces electricity, lots of it, more than what you need. But the second thing is it uses water to run in channels between these PV cells with the dual purpose of, one, cooling them, making them more efficient and more effective than other solar cells. But secondly, this water is being heated to 70 or 80 degrees Celsius and can be used for your water heating needs. And when water heating takes up 40% of a household's electrical budget, this is quite significant. This is an example of a New Zealand firm leading the world on the science front. But let's move away from solar panels and look at some more science. This is a wind turbine. Quite common things. You'll often find them in a rural setting, in a farm. They're quite tall, they're quite large, it's hard to miss. They do, however, provide a good way to get electricity for when you need it. But when you want to apply this in a rural setting, in an urban setting, you need to make a couple changes. These changes are being pioneered by New Zealanders. It's a technology called windsong. Imagine that on its side. It looks a bit like an air conditioning duct. It's got the same capacity as a rural-scale wind turbine, but you can put it on your roof in an urban setting. Researchers at Victoria University, right here, are among those that are leading the world in pioneering new ways of innovating wind technology. Whether it's solar or wind, when it comes to the technology behind renewable energy generation, us Kiwis are leading the world. But this is my personal favourite, microhydro. Inside this little box is a turbine that gets spun round and generates electricity. This little beauty will set you back $15,000 to $20,000 if you're buying it on the open market. But New Zealand farmers have been producing them in their backyards for years, for free. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is the pinnacle of New Zealand engineering excellence. So what have we got? We've got three key technologies that can be applied in an urban setting, in a rural setting, any setting. They can be applied cheaply and effectively to give you power without having to connect to the national grid and getting it from Huntly. How much does it work? If you have a couple solar panels on your roof, you can easily generate enough electricity for 3 households. Give yourself a little wind turbine as well, that's enough for another 6. And if you happen to have a bit of a waterfall in your backyard, a bit of a stream and a bit of a drop, you can put one of these things in as well and fuel another 6 houses. If you want to take advantage of these opportunities, you could provide enough electricity for your entire street. But hey, that's just some of the science. This is the big hurdle, storage, because you don't always have sun, you don't always have wind. And so in order for this to work, we have to overcome the intermittency problems. The reasons behind this, load levelling or peak shaving. Load levelling is you effectively produce the same amount of power throughout the day, and when you've got excess, you store it for when you don't have enough. Peak shaving is a similar principle, as you can see up behind me, but it's to a lesser extent. Either way, you need some way of containing what you produce in peak hours to use it when it's dark, or to use it when the air is still. So this is how we currently store things. There's a lithium-ion battery. You've probably got one in your car. They're very heavy. They don't have that much capacity. So what if we did something different? This here involves liquid magnesium and liquid antimony, two earth-abundant metals. It operates at an incredibly high temperature, and it has no moving parts. It's called the liquid metal battery, and it's been pioneered by some researchers at MIT. The dream? A 2 megawatt-hour capacity shipping container you can chuck on the back of a truck and provide the equivalent of 3 months' power for a New Zealand household. And in the States also, they've gone a bit over the top. This is a nickel-cadmium battery in Alaska, providing power to a city. It is 2,000 square metres in size and weighs 1,300 tonnes. Very impractical, but it's American. Here in New Zealand, we like to do things better, and I'd like to think that we can do something that no one else in the world can. This is Central Otago. It's a beautiful place. It's Lake Onslow, also a beautiful place. What's special about Lake Onslow is that it has the capacity for what's called pumped hydroelectricity generation. It involves when you've got excess power, you use it to pump water uphill to a storage facility, so that when you don't have enough, you can let it pump downhill and turn a turbine there, and therefore provide power for when you don't have enough. Just how much capacity is in that lake? Let's take a look at our year planner. We're planning on having 3 months without electricity in New Zealand, because that's how much capacity that lake could hold. It could power all of New Zealand's electricity needs for over 3 months. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is absolutely incredible, and that is where New Zealand is leading the world in the technology. There's a project currently underway being led by a team at Waikato University to look at exactly how we're going to make this work and how we're going to lead the world in green-table storage. No one else can beat us on this front. So there we have the science bubble. I call it a bubble because I like to keep it contained. At the bottom we've got producing electricity, the 3 common ways we do that, led by New Zealand firms doing things the New Zealand way. And up the top we've got how we're going to store that energy and make it work. But what's the point in having the science? Let's look at the economic benefits to begin with. If your house is connected up to a scheme using distributed power, you can earn yourself a lot of money. I've already given you the statistic, over $1,000 a year. It's an awful lot, not to mention not having to pay an electricity bill or a water heating bill. Transpower is expecting to spend $5 billion over the next few years upgrading its power stations, power lines. Imagine if we could cut that. Imagine if we didn't need to upgrade the facility at Huntly because everyone was putting solar panels on their roofs. Sorry about the people in Huntly. But last of all, and this is where it's most important for New Zealand, we play off our 100% pure so much. It gets a bit tiresome sometimes. But we need to reinforce that. We need to make sure that the future that we live in, we're making the most of that. And so, how about reinforcing with it being idea leaders? We export idea professionals, people who have the ideas of generating electricity in a sustainable manner, of distributing it to those who need it, and leading the world in renewable energy distribution. In the words of Sir Paul Callaghan, we need to showcase the technology that we want to give to the rest of the world. And let's face it, if we're making money off distributed power, if we're making money off solar panels and we're not having to pay for the next generation of polluting fossil fuel power plants, the other countries are going to be jealous. Ooh, they'll be jealous. And jealousy is good for the wallet. We can export the professionals who can travel to the other countries around the world and teach them how to follow in our footsteps. We can be idea leaders. And now, onto the social benefits, because life's not all about money. What can we do with distributed power that isn't just about generating money for individuals or for the country as a whole? I'd like to think that there are some quite tangible and quite real social benefits to be gained from distributed power as well as the economic benefits. And it's going to begin with the fact that distributed power is inherently a socially inclusive concept. If you are supplying solar power to your neighbour when it's sunny, and he is providing you with wind power when it's windy and not sunny, you're establishing relationships between people. You're strengthening communities to work together. And you're helping build a society where people feel included. They feel they have something to offer, and they feel they can get along with each other, and that's something quite valuable. That's something that we've got to hang on to in an increasingly technological world. But then you've also got the concept that distributed power provides people with an education about how things work, an education about science, about the way energy is done. At the moment, we just think of power as something that just comes surging through the cables, something that just comes magically to the light bulbs when you flick a switch. Who in this room really stops and think, where does that come from? If you're thinking of distributed power systems, you're thinking of community engagement with some of the pressing issues of our generation. And some of these pressing issues are, of course, environmental. This is, in fact, the strongest argument for distributed power, because renewable technologies are most advantageous when they're distributed in nature. You can't have a giant solar farm, it's simply not practical. You can't have fields and fields and fields of windmills, because no one could live there. So you have to think of a method of producing electricity that makes the most of all the different sustainable technologies. So by using distributed power systems, you're minimising your impact on the countryside because you're not having the need for new giant power stations. You're reducing the pollution around them. If you're producing energy at your own household, that means that the energy that you're producing is coming from renewable sources, so you're not having carbon emissions coming out. But last of all, and most importantly of all, is resources. And the more pressure that we have on resources, the more need we have to mine our beautiful countryside. And I, for one, believe that the less we need oil, the less we need gas, we may not have to dig up our beautiful South Island as much as it is. And then there's one final point, which I think could well be the most important of them all. New Zealand's quite prone to natural disasters, as I'm sure you all know. In Christchurch, this image is of a linesman fixing a broken power line following the quake. You notice that it's winter. Currently, when you're getting electricity, it's coming through these lines. And a distributed power system, you can still function post-disaster. You can still generate electricity for when you need it, and you can still cope with the effects of a natural disaster. In Wellington specifically, I'm going to talk about how we would actually be stuffed, to put it to the least, if there was an earthquake right here. They wouldn't be able to get anything in. The harbour would be uneven. We don't have transmission gully yet, so nothing would be able to come in that way. We certainly wouldn't have any rail links. As for those power pylons that stride across the countryside, they'd be gone. We need distributed power to be able to cope after an earthquake in Wellington. We need it across the country. So what have we got? We've got a big arrow that's got all these environmental benefits. We've got this other big arrow that's got all these social benefits, and we've got up the top the economic. Along these three strands, there's quite a compelling argument to support distributed power systems. And when we consider a disaster scenario, it becomes all the more necessary. So why would we do it? If there's one thing I could tell you right now, it's to build a resilient and dynamic energy distribution system. A system that can function after a disaster. It can function after a resource crisis. It can function with the increased stress of climate change. And it's dynamic because it allows you to choose between a huge range of renewable technologies. It allows you to make the most of what we have out there that currently isn't being exploited because people can't feel they can make money off it by connecting their house to the grid. So on all these fronts, because distributed power systems give us money as a country, they bolster our image, there's no better way to market ourselves as 100% pure than to lead the world in this field. I think it is apparent that this is the way of the future. And now it's up to you, ladies and gentlemen, the people of this room, the people who are going to be making the decisions about where our power future lies. And I urge you all to consider this issue and to think about what you can do to make distributed power a reality. Thank you.